Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve? I know I'm feeling a little chilled out today given it's only 11 degrees outside. Good time to be inside doing some podcasting.
Well, that's right. We just passed the solstice the other week, and yes, you're right. It certainly is cool everywhere. I don't think there's many places around at our end of the world that are above 12 degrees Celsius at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Although maybe we can heat this up a little bit, sort of piggybacking off the topic that we covered last time. We spoke about how intellectuals engage in discourse and how they argue against each other and whatnot. Going in a slightly different direction now, and just to preface it, the intellectuals having their discussions is really about them getting into like sort of a deep dive into a discussion that can take a long time, has lots of concepts. It's not something that can be easily digested in a tweet or a soundbite or whatever. But if you bring it back in the other direction and you think about the sort of tribal kind of sort of discourse that we have in society these days, and how we're going more and more along the lines of we only are going to accept what our side believes in, and rather than sort of engaging in a sort of a fair and not necessarily like-minded, but a fair discussion with someone who doesn't agree with you, and trying to maybe find a middle ground or whatever, we're getting into these sort of situations where people will talk over the top of each other and adamantly say that the sky's green, and you've got no opportunity to say that it's actually blue, and you can even just point up at the sky and say it and they'll still say it's green. So I don't know if just as a starting point, I kind of find that stuff depressing, and kind of makes me wonder why you'd want to engage at all when you've got really no way to argue in a scenario like that.
Yeah, I think these are always very tough situations when either you have a very strong point of view, or perhaps you might even really want to debate something for your own benefit, to test your own ideas, or even to hear someone else's point of view. However, when somebody has a very singular and particular sort of view, which they want to drive at all costs, then that's where we hit these situations. I mean, typically, and I'm not very good at practicing what I'm about to say, I think you still just have to take it on face value, let them say their bit, ask them a few questions. If they say the sky's green, ask them how they know. Let them tell you. If you really disagree, it's best, I think, actually to get them to lay out all of their argument. And then you can choose if you want to pick up any points and try and advance the topic. But I think it's important that you just remember, I think in those instances, if you really are polarized and it really is a matter of opinion and you're not searching for facts or evidence, then there's no point in picking a fight.
Well, what about, and I think
unless you want more ratings.
Yeah, of course.
That works really well.
Of course. Using this as an example, the one that came up in my various sort of YouTube video watching sessions, which was they were having this discussion around, these people saying that the Earth's flat, and but what about the International Space Station taking a shot every 10 minutes, which definitely shows that the Earth's round, or that's just CG.
That's right.
And I'm just wondering, opinions are fair enough.
Landings were faked.
Yeah, opinions are fair enough, but when it starts going down the path of it's actually a fact, and then they're starting to say no, it's not. What do you really do in those situations? Because it might be okay to walk away from one person or two people or three, but if that type of thinking starts to infect the broader section of the population, I think that's actually really could potentially be quite serious and really damaging.
Well, you've precisely hit the point, the really critical point here. However, if you're arguing something rationally that can be proven and somebody has an alternate point of view which is completely like wacko, all the evidence shows that if you confront them and try to debunk their argument, you will only make them more convinced of their argument. So it's kind of like a lose-lose situation. And this has been shown with vaccination. It's been shown in so many different cases. And one of the most interesting cases is, say, for something that doesn't matter, it's irrational to be afraid of a spider or a snake, just because you see a picture of it, or it might be within 10 metres of you, but no threat. It's irrational. But if you tell a person that they shouldn't feel like that, who has that fear, well, they're going to get upset with you. They're going to get angry because they're afraid, even though they know it's irrational, but So you have to think about it in those terms. And there probably really isn't much point engaging, but you have made the point. If you don't stand up for it, or stand up for what's true, then how do you stop this misinformation spreading and people having the wrong ideas? So when, say, we come to something like creationism versus evolution, which is still a big debate that goes on in the US, what do? Do you fight for what you think is the truth? And I'm not taking either side there. Do you fight for it? And what are you going to do? You're just going to create a bigger fight, and then more people take sides, and it doesn't actually prove anything in the end. However, the alternative is to let some people with wacko ideas take over the world. So I don't know. Do you have an answer?
Well, on that note, it's a nice segue into Trump land right there. The more I watch some of the coverage of what's going on in that administration, the more it seems like what you've just said there. What happens when you then get these types of people and they end up in positions of power? Now, Trump is his own beast in and of himself, so there's a whole other thing going on with him that is probably worthy of a separate discussion to what we're talking about here. But to use a counterpoint example, which I think is a bit more insidious than just, I believe this and this is what it should be. The committee hearings held over the weekend where the Deputy Attorney General in the States and the FBI Director were absolutely hammered by Republican, the Senate committee members, or congressional committee members, who were absolutely hammering them about not supplying all the documentation and information that they requested, and all of that sort of thing. And I was watching it, and there was two things immediately apparent: that what they were saying wasn't true, and there were a couple of instances where where he was able to hit him really quickly before he cut him off. The deputy AG actually corrected him. There's that, but then there's also the fact that he didn't even give them the chance to respond to anything. So he'll say he would drop something like, "Why are you withholding information from us?" And then he would start to answer, and then he would just cut him off and say, "Oh no, sorry, our colleagues are going to say that you didn't do that and whatever." And there was more. That doesn't seem to me to be. It's using the same tactics of what we were just talking about, where you talk over the top, you don't accept anything other than your point of view. But there's something even more insidious under that, in that potentially what they're doing is trying to muddy the waters, cloud everything, make these guys look incompetent, so that if they ever reveal anything out of the Russia investigation, they can say, well, no, they're all full of it. Trump's in the clear. This is all a witch hunt, and it's all playing into that narrative, which adds another level of insidious to it and complication that, frankly, you don't need when that environment in and of itself is kind of toxic anyway.
Well, that's right, but I think we've spoken about this before. This is just part of that greater strategy. I mean, as you say, even if they found some links now, to Russia or something like that. Honestly, as an observer, I'm so confused now. It's as if almost everyone's over it. It's almost like let's just shut this down. We're sick of this. It's a very clever tactic. I would say if you wanted to, I don't know, to build a haystack so you could hide a needle in it,
Yeah.
This is the way to do it.
Well, the irony, just on what you were mentioning there about, let's shut this down, and that was one of the other calls that they were making in that hearing. The particular member who was making that request, shall we say, to shut it down, wrap it up, bring it all to an end. This same guy ran his own hearing. It was investigating Hillary Clinton and the Benghazi stuff. And he went 2.5 times as long as what the Russian investigation has so far, and he didn't bring any indictments. Whereas the current Russia one has brought 20 indictments in a third of the time. And you sit there and you think, how can these guys actually sit there with a straight face and try and get away with stuff like that? But then you realize they just don't care, because it's almost like a performance, really. They get their sound. It's almost like everything they did was designed as sound bites that could be played well on the news and on Twitter and whatever else, and that's all people see.
Well, I agree. I think that's where we're headed with politics in general. I think the whole world's going like that. And just to refer, say, to something locally, with Bill Shorten tripping up on the whole small medium enterprise tax policy this week, that's just being caught in this rhetoric cycle. He's not even thinking anymore about whether it's right or not. It's just that little echo chamber. And what's happened is he's been going in circles, and the circles are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, until he ends up with nowhere to go. I mean, that's because it's just all sound bites. Everything's being played to hit a mark in some focus group, some age group, some target audience, and that's where you end up. The Trump thing's going the same way, and I think, unfortunately, by and large, our politics, just about everywhere in Western democracy, is starting just to become an echo chamber, and that's a concern, because people aren't listening anymore, or really thinking about wider implications.
So I guess to try and bring it all together, it kind of leads to a really sort of dark place.
Very.
That the question being, if it goes down that path, is it recoverable? Do you get yourself out of it, or is this just more like a sort of like a bad fever, and it'll break at some point?
Well, I think both is possible, but I used to sit around wondering how Skynet ever took over. But if our political leaders keep up with this sort of behaviour, Skynet will take over. As simple as that.
Probably be better for us in this instance.
At least the first few years. But I think that that's the sort of thing that will happen, because they're not governing, they're not leading anymore. They're just talking, and they just got points of view, and that's just gone to the extreme end. I mean, they're not extreme radical views, I wouldn't say, that our politicians have, but they're at the extreme end of political opinion, in that they don't really have any substance anymore. They're just about making a point, scoring a point, and getting more people supporting their opinion.
And I guess the only other thing I wanted to point out too is that the era we're living in, with the technology that we're living in, it allows for the sort of hardline partisan position, whatever it is, left, right, middle, back to front, whatever it is that you're doing, all of that it enables people in those blocks to have a voice that they probably would never have had. It's basically a nice big light shone on them, and they can broadcast themselves, and then insidiously hook up together because the technology allows them to do it. I mean, that's essentially what social media was designed to do. It was to connect people up through networks. It's just that the unintended consequence of that is that if you've got hyper-partisan people, they're going to find each other, and then as a group, when they come together as groups, they've got a louder voice, and it's harder to ignore them.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you're absolutely right. Partisan is the word. Polarising is the other thing, and we've spoken about this at length. And really, if you were to ask me, I think these days we've got two right-wing groups. One's right wing and one's left wing, but they're both right wing. They're very intolerant of other people's views, and they're very intolerant of engaging the other people's views. And we're seeing that the anti-Trump people, God knows they might have a good case, but they've got to come up with a better way of forcing him, if they feel he needs to, be accountable. They've got to come up with a better way than just screaming at him, because it's playing right into that side's hands, and two, it's achieving nothing except strengthening the opposition's belief that they're more right.
Yeah, exactly.
And they can't both be right.
Well, we'd hope not. Anyway, all right, Steve, we might wrap it up there. Any final thoughts? The only thing I can think of is let's hope it improves.
My final thought is one from George W. Bush. I choose to believe in the science I choose to believe in.
And now I feel all sorts of better after that. Alrighty, so don't forget our website, SciTechCulture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to all of our channels, YouTube, Vimeo, RSS feeds, and etc. And you can catch us on whatever device or computer you happen to be sitting in front of at the time, and we hope you enjoy all the content there. Alright, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.